All right. So this is part of my attempt to actually understand blockchain. I've ventured to do a little bit of research from different resources online and a few books that I have been recommended from my MBA cohort. And the whole objective of this is to learn the basics of how blockchains really work and explore the most well-known implementation of blockchain, which is Bitcoin and other kind of cryptocurrencies. Um, is it really an earth-shattering technology that is going to change everything for everyone, or it's just a hype, just as we hear and see in different, newer technologies with lots of buzzwords that people use over and over again? Well, the deeper that I really looked into that, the more I realized that it is just a new solution to a very old and well-known problem that traders and business people have faced, which is trust. So let's say that there is a farmer who has oranges in Florida and wants to trade them for a livestock in Texas, for instance, from a rancher. This rancher really likes the deal and wonders, is the market or the farmer is already promising these kind of oranges to someone else in exchange for, let's say, cowhide that the rancher sells. And in this case, there is a barrier to the success of this transaction, which is that the rancher lacks the trust in the oranges and that there are still the farmers, and he doesn't have the right to offer them for exchange for what the rancher has. And he doesn't want anyone else to come and look at them and play with his oranges that he was promised. So trust is really a key element for any transactions, and there must be some type of mechanism that is already in place that assures that each party will receive the value that it was specified originally in a contract, if there is a contract actually. And so the old trust mechanisms that were used or still are actually being used, there is a knowledge and good faith in the other party. We just approach someone based on their reputation and the goodwill that they have, and we put some or invest in some of our trust into that. Sometimes there is the insurance products that are in the market that help, establish these kinds of trusts. In real estate, this is very famous in escrow accounts. There are other financial arrangements where a third party will hold a financial instrument between both parties, and it's just held there until the transaction is completed and the assets or the resources are exchanged between parties. The other third and very well-known mechanism, which is the authorities and the legal structures that are conveyed and reflected in the contracts between individual parties. Um, they represent really the force of law. If someone really breaks the deal or the contract, the whole transaction falls apart. But there is a very related tax implications for such authorities and implications. We pay for it. We pay for it indirectly through the increased taxes, really. So there is certain drawbacks for these kinds of mechanisms that we have. There is added transaction fees, either explicit fees or implicit costs, as we just mentioned in taxes. There's a third-party compensation, and it all adds up into the cost of a transaction. There's a loss of privacy in these transactions. Uh, it's a layer of security that we have to worry about. Certain, transaction details that we don't want the third-party people to really be exposed to or know about. So there is loss of privacy here. And there's also the delay in completing the transaction. You have two transacting parties, but then you have that trust mechanism in between, which slows down the whole process and makes it really less efficient, especially if you talk about global and international kind of trade. So in addition to these drawbacks, you have to also trust that that third party is actually trustworthy as well. So you're not trusting the other part of the transaction, but also extending that trust to reach that third party. It all slows down, adds costs, and takes away from our privacy. But what if there was a way that that farmer and rancher that actually could do that transaction without incurring any additional costs, without losing any privacy and establish more trust with the other part without, exposing yourself. And well, come to find, this is actually the promise of a blockchain. This is what blockchain does. It allows that kind of exchange. It allows that kind of implementation of transactions without having those all drawbacks. This is what really, in essence, is a blockchain. There is a very specific definition that is, or different definitions really that you could find online on different parts or coming from different experts in this field. But the very famous one is that it is a blockchain is a peer-to-peer distributed ledger that is cryptographically secure, append only, and updated by consensus. In this presentation, I try to discuss the almost all of the definition parts, which is the peer-to-peer, the distributed ledger, the cryptographically security, the append only, but the updated in consensus is a very vast and very technical term that if we have the time later on, we can dedicate another presentation for it. So a peer-to-peer or a peer-to-peer, what do you mean by peer-to-peer? It means that there's no single node or group of nodes that control the other nodes in a blockchain. So a blockchain is constituted of nodes, multiple networks of computers, and there's no one single node or computer, let's say, or part of this distributed ledger that has a complete control of it. There's no centralization of power over the network, and this addresses the drawback of being untrustworthy third party that we have mentioned before, because if some nodes are controlled by others, then this would essentially make this central third party the controller and could corrupt the whole concept of how transactions are recorded and distributed between the different nodes. The basic unit of any blockchain is the node, as we mentioned. You probably have figured that already. And a node would consist either by one computer or multiple computers that verify the transactions, store them, and also broadcast these transactions into other computers within the network. And it's all synchronized in real time across the network. Whatever you see in one node really matches the other node. In the old form of bookkeeping, the double entry system that is well known, the debits, the credits, the transactions are not really distributed. It's centralized in one book. And because now every computer holds a copy or a complete copy of the entire ledger and collaborate to make sure that it agrees with all of the books in the node, it makes it very important that every computer not only adds but also verifies the transaction, which adds another layer of security on top of having that distributed ledger among a network of computers. Let's say also for one reason or another, one computer fails for one technical issue or another, because we have multiple copies of it, real time distributed among different computers. If one fails, that's fine. We have different copies stored in different computers, which also adds another layer of security. Now, the cryptography, this is a very really technical term, but it is really what makes it so hard to tamper with the information. And the cryptography in a blockchain has two really main characteristics, or not two main parts, not characteristics really. Every transaction has its own fingerprint, and once a transaction is written down and put into the blockchain, there is another key of cryptography put on top of the transaction. So the key inside to get into the block, and there is a key on top of the block itself that connects it with the next transaction. So every transaction has two, one that defines what's inside and one defines what connects to it. And that's where we come with the append only. So because the key that is outside the block connects to the next block, it's so hard, it's almost impossible, as a matter of fact, because of how these numbers are generated, to delete a block and add a new one or inject a new block into the chain of transactions. Um, because whatever is it's built on creates the basis for the next transaction to be built on. I hope I'm clear about this, because like the research or the way that I looked at it, it's actually very complicated, and there's so much permutations and calculations that come into really generating these numbers. And I've added a link here if anyone is interested to learn more about it. You could go and dabble into some of these technical terms, and it's mathematicians, I believe, would love that. The other part of the definition, which is the append only, I think I jumped into that. There is a hash function, a function, um, which is an equation really that generates based on the information that is in the block, uh, connected to every transaction within there, in what happens. So let's say the transaction, for instance, has the name I highlighted here, Crystal, and Crystal is spelled with Crystal. You cannot really change it into Crystal by adding the H, because it will be completely different hash function inside it. And this is the part that actually very secure. Um, every aspect or every element within a transaction really plays into the key or the cryptographic key that makes the transaction secure. So whatever is inside affects the key that is outside on the blockchain. This is why we can add, we cannot delete transactions. Once a transaction is in the blockchain, it is secure, it is locked in there. And if there's any changes in the balances that you have within the blockchain, you have to change it by making another transaction. Um, and this really intersects with the mining of Bitcoin. It intersects with uh, how once you get a transaction into the system, it's just locked in there. It's not going anywhere. And this makes it very harder for any hacker actually to change, to add, to append, to delete. It's locked. I keep repeating that, but it's really this is the mind shattering or the kind of newer technology that is makes it very secure, because hackers right now could jump into these network of transactions, and sometimes they can add and delete and play with the numbers the way that they wish. With this, it's almost impossible, because you have to change the whole chain in order for you to add something into it. Um, Now, this is really what I have really come up with so far. And the next, if we have the time, and it's only 15 minutes, we can get into the cryptography. We can get into more of these hash functions and the consensus mechanisms. And sometimes, because certain computers within the blockchain might be faster than another blockchain, uh, one can confirm a transaction that is incorrect. How do we handle that? How do we get to create a consensus between different nodes and reach that consensus in a fast way? One of the challenges right now that is faced by blockchain technologies is actually the processing time for these transactions. It's a little bit getting better. It's getting better actually by the minute, but it also, we can talk about how we can implement these technologies into generating on mining Bitcoin and other coins. Also, the other thing, because of how decentralized by nature or by design, let's say, blockchains are, um, this brings a lot of questions about how does that fall within a centralized financial system that we have globally with central banks. and central government. And there's so many examples that are actually of blockchains and other bitcoins and not Bitcoin. The term is uh, cryptocurrencies that are creating their own kind of economical rules and financial rules and decentralized finances around the world. And I think it's also intersects with financial stability of certain markets and the stability actually of the financial system as we know right now. And how does that really play along the lines of illicit behavior by certain players of the market, within uh, maybe money laundering, exchanging funds with for the lack of a better term, rogue nations, as we probably hear it here in the United States, and so on and so forth. But this is what I have so far. I hope this is helpful, and I'm ready to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Marwan. Yeah, this is great. Especially, I think definitely this really appreciate how you went through this really the essence of this blockchain, how this is structured and how this makes it secure and all that. And really fascinated. Personally, I'm really fascinated by how this emergence had impacted whole financial industries, how the banks plays a role. So it is another, I guess, going back to the years of like black shells with derivatives. I think this is something like a totally different um, paradigm, which affects the whole industry, and not only the financial industry. What it is, I see these days definitely the impact in all the industries. And one thing I do also see is that it is the transparency that this is also making the use of this technology, I guess.
It
Thank
certainly, yeah, it provides a lot of transparency. Some people call it democratization of the financial system. Uh, I'm approaching all of this with a lot of scrutiny. I'm not really sure because there is the illicit players in the game. You read about a lot of money launderers using this, uh,
you.
drug dealers. There are actually like even smaller drug dealers in the market to exchange. They do the transaction using the
Mm,
bitcoins and what have you of that nature. So it has a social impact, has a financial impact, and it could be something either the future or something just straight from hell that we do not know how to deal with. So it would be
yeah.
interesting to see how things play out.
Yeah.
So, Marwan, uh, one query. So, who maintains the network right now?
I'm sorry, Manas. Can you say that again? Something about the
Who
network. That's right.
maintains the current network? You put that into all these pieces of code that goes into the network. Now, who are the players who are maintaining this network? It might be a very basic question.
Right. Um, so just
So, there are
like I
two
believe,
queries I have. One is
right.
who writes this code and who maintains the network. So, how are they related now?
Manas, can you help me again and just restate your question? I'm having a hard time really understanding what you're saying.
Who writes the code? So, who are the people who are writing this crypto codes or blockchain codes for any type of solution that they are talking about? And
R-
who are the players who are maintaining the network where this code goes into?
Right. I would assume I'm not really an expert again in this, but I think um, it's a self-organized really group of people. Usually, whoever really uses the um, the coins kind of programming and cryptography language, um, they kind of self-organize. The way that I'm understanding this is um, that everything, let's say Bitcoin or you got Ethereum, these are blockchain really technologies. These are certain programming language when it comes to the cryptography, um, and we buy blocks when we purchase these kind of uh, cryptocurrencies. We buy blocks on the chain. Really, we buy in real estate on the chain. We saying that this block is for me and or for you, and whoever really gets more traction in the network or in a newly developed language, I think they own the majority of it, and this is how it happened. Like we heard that in Dogecoin, for instance.
See, uh,
Okay.
what I have read is that, in especially like in case of blockchain, sorry, Bitcoin, there are, those dedicated mathematicians who are running big computing, who are running big computers with great computing power, and they are generating just bitcoins based on the already agreed rules
Right,
and codes. And there is also a thing that, there is a limit to the number of bitcoins which can be generated in the lifespan. You cannot generate beyond those numbers. So I'm not sure, what percentage they have already reached, but there is a limit to the number of bitcoins they can generate. And
right,
after each, new bitcoin is generated, the next bitcoin generation takes, so much computing power that there is another debate in this that, this is not environment friendly. Sashio, the conversation which we were having earlier.
Yeah.
So, they are raising questions on those kind of things. And so that is a broad concept which I have read, especially for Bitcoin. But then as you go to the broader concept of cryptocurrency or blockchain, uh, like if insurance company is launching a blockchain model, they will have their own rules, and then it will, have a totally different set of rules with each player agreeing to that and, being a part of those nodes within that ledger.
right.
Yeah. What I also hear is this there's a guy which we're not sure if he exists, but this guy called Satoshi Nakamoto,
Mhm.
who's named to be a Japanese, who had written this white paper relate to this. Um, I would say it's a yeah, and relate to this cryptocurrency, and it seems from that white paper, this concept has evolved, and yeah, that's. But we're not sure who this person is. It is still unknown, but it seems that from that, there's been a lot of evolvements around. That's what I hear.
If I also heard about that.
Yeah.
Some people say that he was a researcher in Cambridge who created that concept, but uh,
Again,
there's very
it's
little
a
information
it's
about
a
that.
question of, like those hash, how many combinations you can generate, and then that is driven by, the underlying rules. So you can't go, in case of like Bitcoin, you will not be able to generate beyond a certain number of Bitcoins. It is
Mm.
already determined by those
Mm.
mathematical rules.
Mm.
Right. I mean, this is the older really. It's fast, strange how fast this moves, but this is like the older concept of how really cryptocurrency is generated. Right now, if you would go to Coinbase, the wallet app, there is hundreds of cryptocurrencies that are exchanged, and each one of them seems to have its own kind of business model and slash of economic model. I have read about certain coins that it's self-governing in terms of how many coins or blocks they're generating, the price for it, and the consensus process is not only about adding transactions, but also determining the value for each block. And they vote, they meet actually on a quarterly basis, some of them on monthly basis, some of them on a weekly basis, and they decide how much coin they're going to put in the market, how much coins they're going to take out of the market, which is interesting because it's like they are forming their own kind of governments within the bigger kind of financial markets, and it's bringing
their own central bank.
exactly. And it's like, okay, so why did you create that from the good going if you are really bringing old economical models into the play right now and injecting them into newer technologies? So I've heard theories about how this could be broken down into fractals, and each kind of economical financial system could be broken down into like smaller blockchains of things and events. And so I think the biggest concern is if I was in the financial like kind of institutions, or if I was in governments and authorities, it's really how do you organize that? How are you gonna add a layer of security towards that? Because right now it's the wild west between mining and the frenzy of mining, and people who are putting money and stabilizing the prices. Like, it's mind-boggling for me that Doge, which was like a meme, it was created as a joke to show how easy it is to mine, and it doesn't have to be super expensive and costly in terms of technology and power, can actually have a stable price. Like, it's been stable for the past 3 months or so, at hovering between 28 cents to 30 cents, and it keeps going up and down. And if you manage to figure out the trade patterns, you could actually make easy money off of it. At least they tried it here in the United States, and with more trading and more stabilized price, you actually have an asset. You have a financial instrument right here, with assets in the clouds, really untraceable.
That's why, some of the central banks are getting jittery.
Yeah,
Because, these currencies are basically challenging their currencies, like in
exactly.
India, as I think it is still illegal, to basically deal in any cryptocurrency. And then, of course, Central Bank of India is, thinking of launching their own version of the cryptocurrency.
But China has launched its own.
Yeah,
They did.
correct.
So
But
I wouldn't
do
be
you
surprised.
think the cryptocurrency of China it's untraceable? Or the government knows something in China?
I mean, this is really a very interesting question. I don't know. I think China is really advanced in certain like technological developments. Like, they are taking the lead on a lot. So, like, when it comes to AI in specific, to be honest, I think they're way ahead almost of anyone else. We saw the implementation of that in contact tracing with COVID. It could be part of their national initiative to be on top of things. It's something that if implemented correctly, I think with like other e-trade or like Alibaba platforms and stuff like that, this could bring them money easily.
Yeah,
And,
I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
with a lot of these new cryptocurrencies, do you know what is a good currency or trust currency or some scam?
Bitcoin, I mean, I don't know what's the price. I didn't check the price today.
Yeah, but that's the first, and I think it's reliable. But there's I checked the Coinbase and crypto app. It surprised me that there's a lot of new cryptocurrency, and I think it's every day that you see new crypto coin, and once I see the app, my question is, what is a good currency? What is a reliable currency, or someone that the next date will broke, or because this is all secret. If you lost your money, you lost it. That's what I think.
Right. If you lose
Yeah.
it, you lose
Yeah.
it, most definitely. And a
Yeah.
lot of people have lost tons of money. I've
Yeah.
seen people losing their lifetime savings.
Mhm.
But you know,
Yeah.
it's Bitcoin. I think is the most famous, the most stable. It's at $50,000 a coin. Um, so yeah, I think you have to look just like any other currency. How much money has been put into that? What is the the trade volume, and what is the average price, and you have to keep an eye really, make sure. I mean, the price drops and drops fast sometimes, but probably not as fast as selling the trade. Like you could sell almost instantaneously on Robinhood. um, the interesting part I think to look into is like how these like newer financial institutions like Robinhood and Webull and what do you have, you like the new retail platforms, how do they really hedge against the drop of these assets? Because for them to make things faster in terms of transacting, I think they buy in bulk these kinds of coins and cryptocurrencies, and they resell them in retail. I would assume with a margin. um, how do they hedge against that? How do they hedge against the risk of a price just dropping so fast? And apparently they're making money off of it. So again, it's the wild west. There's not so much of regulations into place. We have shared like there is a framework of how to legalize, not legalize, but like organize it, and and I think it's one of those subjects that either you approach it with objective, critical, scrutinizing kind of perspective, and see if you can add value or adjust into it as an institution, or you can simply completely ignore it. And like anything else in innovation, you're risking just being stale and stagnant. And so it's worth really the R&D, I think, and the investment in that kind of sense. Because the technology itself, like the idea of how you can build a consensus into assets that are being added or investments that are being added, could be implemented in different ways. Like it could be implemented into document exchange. Let's say a network of manufacturers, or let's say a supply chain. Like let's take it a little further, and the supply chain has different really players, and they're vertically integrated or even horizontally, and they have those exchanges of estimates and work proposals and quotes and purchase orders and invoices. This is a very costly process, and it takes a lot of assets and resources. What if these companies in a supply chain just implemented a certain blockchain technology to exchange these documents among each other faster, in a faster way, with a consensus between 2 or 3 or 4 companies within a chain? This is going to save them a lot of money. You hear some really futuristic and way over my head kind of implementations, especially like in the creative arts, and with NFTs. They have the non-fungible tokens, which is like an implementation of the blockchain right now. And artists and musicians, they created their own kind of economy around it, like their assets that are cryptographically secured, and they want to sell tickets, they want to sell baseball cards, they want to sell their own artistic work, they want to sell like hidden messages, and they want to share their profits with their fans and their kind of fellowships of people using these kinds of technologies. So you have sub economies, or meta economies, of whatever you want to really describe them, being created within bigger economies. So I think the sky is the limit for the technology itself. just who's gonna really take
Mm.
charge of that? Who's gonna really organize this for anyone else? We haven't had something like this since maybe World War II or so, until the Americans,
Mm.
took charge of the financial system globally and created the system that we know of, and we apparently all love it, and it's working well for everyone, I guess, for the most part. But who's gonna take charge in this right now? That's why I think financial
Yeah.
institutions should approach it with a little bit of more open mind.